books were really big in my family growing up. My dad loved to read spy novels. So he would read, that's what he did in his free time. He would read spy novels. My mom loved classic fiction. Our joke in our family was that she loved Charles Dickens, and she could quote every Charles Dickens opening line of every book. My sister, she loved fiction, loved all kinds of novels. So my sister, she was very much into books. She was into fiction books. She would not just digest a book at a time. She would digest a series at a time. She would just lay on her bed and read and read and read. And then there was me. And I was a little bit different kind of a reader. I wasn't into the big long fiction books. I wasn't into all the series of books or even the really serious kinds of books. I was into like the short things that were facts and figures and statistics and just the information. I really didn't read a whole lot of longer books until later on. So some of my favorite books were actually magazines because they're really short. I had a subscription one year to Car and Driver magazine. It was one of my favorites, and for whatever reason, I was just really into learning about sports cars. I don't understand why, because we never had a sports car growing up. My parents are not the sports car kind of people, and they never even hinted that we would ever have a sports car. But for some reason, I just thought they were really cool. So I would get Car and Driver magazine every month, and I would leaf through it, and I would read all the statistics about all those different cars, and compare them from one to the other, and try to find, what's the newest, what's the fastest, what's the lightest, what's the best car out there. And I did this for several years as I got these subscriptions. And I think what fed my joy about this is when I became a valet driver in high school, and I got to drive a few of these cars that I've been reading about. And I thought, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. I get to drive these cars at least into the parking garage that I've been reading about, and maybe sometimes just a little bit farther on occasion. But I love these cars, and I love reading about these statistics. And what I noticed is from year to year, as I read about these different cars in these magazines, is that in one year, if I read about it and thought, that is the best car ever, a year later, I'd read the next issue, and there was another one that was so much better. And sometimes it was the exact same car, they just made it better. The next year later. So the next model year was faster, and it accelerated better, and it was lighter, and it got better gas mileage. And somehow, these car manufacturers managed to take the best that ever was and make it even better. They made it brand new. And that's what God promises to do. God promises to make things new. And the Bible talks about this over and over again. As we've been reading through the Old Testament, we've seen themes like this come up. That God promises to people that where they're at or what's going on or what they're doing, that doesn't compare to the new thing that God is going to do down the road. The people in the Bible, the events in the Bible, they all point to this fact that God can make all things new. So, is it true? Can God make things new for us? Can God make our worries new? Can God make our fears about that stuff we don't know what to do with? Can He make it new? The fear we have about our health, can God make it new? That friend or that family member we have, can God make our relationship new? Can God make your stuff new? Can God make my stuff new? Can God make our things new? Well, the Bible talks about this all the time. Over and over again, this seems to come up. And there's a point at which God sent a guy named Isaiah to address this question. And we've looked at this specific situation before, but this is the context for so many things that God seems to be teaching. God's people were not obeying God. Have you ever heard a story start out that way? God's people were not obeying God in the way that God hoped for. And so God presented warnings to them. God said, I don't want this for our relationship. This is not what I planned. And so if you don't start obeying me, then something is going to change and life is going to turn bad. Did the people listen? No. God warned them again. Did the people obey? No. And so God finally said, well, if you're not going to obey, then I have to follow through. And so God sent an enemy nation to conquer them. Most of the people were displaced and sent to that nation called Babylon. They were sent away, and for years and years, they had a totally different kind of life. And as they grew through years and years and had children and settled there and lived lives that are in this country that felt a long way from God, the real feeling set in that they were a very, very long way away from their God. That relationship that they once had didn't feel the same way. That closeness that they had with God wasn't the same. Because people had shoved God to the side. People had separated their lives from God because they didn't need God. And now they started to feel it. So there were a couple people during this exile time, there were some people that started to cry out to God again and say, wait a minute, God, maybe you were right. Maybe that relationship that we had with you, and maybe that obedience that was part of it, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. So they cried out to God and they said, God, would you give us a second chance? Would you make things new? That's what they asked. And so God sent this guy Isaiah to the people, and God talked through Isaiah to them to teach them about this question of, can God really make things new for you right now? Famous lines fill this chapter. And some of the first things that God said to Isaiah before Isaiah started talking to the people were these couple famous lines. This whole passage is in your bulletin. We're just going to read it piece by piece. But the top part of it says, comfort, comfort my people. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. We'll pause there. This is God saying to Isaiah, I'm done with the punishment. They've served their term. It's all done. And when it says speak to Jerusalem, it's like saying speak to all God's people. That's that symbol for all God's people. Speak to them and say, you're done. It's over. So there's a sense of hope that God is doing something new, that maybe God can make these things new. So then Isaiah starts talking to the people. Listen to the things that are happening and try to pick up the big theme of what God's doing here. Isaiah shouts, people are like the grass. Their beauty fades as quickly as the flowers in a field. The grass withers and the flowers fade beneath the breath of the Lord, and so it is with people. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever. Sound familiar? Familiar words. Isaiah keeps going. Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Who's measured off the heavens with his fingers? Who else knows the weight of the earth, or has weighed the mountains and hills on the scale? Who is able to advise the Spirit of the Lord? Who knows enough to give him advice or teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instruction about what is good? No. For all the nations of the world are but a drop in the bucket. They are nothing more than dust on the scales. He picks up the whole earth as though it were a grain of sand. Look up into the heavens. Who created all the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by its name. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. Does Isaiah ever say the words, God can make all things new? In that passage, does Isaiah ever say the words, God can make all things new? No. Does he seem to hint that maybe that's possible? I think he does, and I think he does because he gives us two truths that might be the most basic truths for our faith. Not just the people then, but basic truths for our faith, for how we can hang on to God in any time and trust the fact that God can make things new. Think about the passage and those themes that Isaiah raised, those pictures. He says that we are like grass and flowers in the field that fade, but God is different because God lasts forever. He says that the biggest things we see, like oceans and mountains and things that we can't control or we can't lift or we can't dig up, they're but a flicker in God. They're a grain of sand. The whole earth is just like a grain of sand to God. And the stars in the sky, God is able to know the stars and count the stars and have charge over the stars of the sky. A couple weeks ago when we were on vacation in South Dakota, we had the chance to meet up with my cousin who lives in Rapid City, but happened to be out at Badlands National Park that evening that we went out there. And he's part of an astronomy group that goes out at certain times of year. This is my cousin Scott and his telescope that we got to enjoy along with the other people who were there. And when we were out there, there's dark sky festival. So there was, of course, no moon since it's dark sky. And it's this chance when they do a ranger talk about the stars, and then you get to run to the telescopes and see all these cool things in the sky. Well, Scott had his telescope pointed towards Saturn, and we got to see the actual rings of Saturn. That it's actually like the picture, you see in the magazines. It's really like that. And it was amazing to see these things. And so we looked through the telescope for a while, and once it got darker and darker and darker, then just with the naked eye, you could look up and see everything. As it got later in the night, the Milky Way started to rise. And that's Badlands with the Milky Way starting to rise up. And as it got later, past when we were actually there, it was straight overhead as the Earth moved. I mean, you look up and you can see the billions, hundreds of billions of stars that are in our galaxy. And you look at that and you just think, okay, God, maybe you do have charge over this. Because this is so enormous. And this is but one picture of, I think, what Isaiah is trying to get at. That God is bigger than big. I mean, whatever we think of as big, like oceans and mountains and stars and galaxies, it is nothing compared to how big God is. So if God is bigger than big, then what does that mean? Does that mean that God can have charge over the worries that we have? I think it probably does. If God is bigger than big, do our worries, can our worries continue, and can God do anything with our worries? Well, surely God can do things with our worries. What about the things that we don't know what to do with and the things we're confused about? Does God understand those things? Well, if God is that big, then surely God understands. I mean, if God is bigger than big, then surely God can make things new. I love that Isaiah teaches us about God, and he teaches us about us. Because that's such a foundational thing for how the Bible teaches us. It's not just God, and it's not just us, but it's both. And Isaiah teaches us something about who we are. Because while God is bigger than big, how does Isaiah picture us? Flowers, grass, that just fade. In comparison to God, what are we? We're smaller than small. I mean, you think of the smallest, most brief kind of thing out there, like flowers or grass, that fade away with the seasons, and that's what we are in comparison to our big God. So if God is bigger than big and we're smaller than small, then what does that mean for the stuff that we deal with? Well, it's stuff that we can't handle. It's stuff that we can't do anything about. We might, in our greatest moments, be able to do just a drop of what our big God can do. And I love this because this is just Isaiah's setup. The fact that God is big and we're small, Isaiah's just getting started. Because these are the truths that undergird what Isaiah, I think, is trying to teach us about what God can actually do. This is where Isaiah goes after this. O Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? O Israel, how can you say God ignores your rights? Have you ever heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the... He gives power! Alright, we're going to keep going. He gives power to the weak, and he gives strength to the powerless. Let's read it. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. I think Carmel was right on with what he was talking about. Seriously, because have you ever seen an eagle flap and flap and flap and flap its wings?
Yes.
Sometimes to get up in the air, but when they're up there, they're riding the currents. They're soaring. And the coolest thing about eagles is they have these little sensors somewhere in their, not their nose, their beak, and they have these sensors that actually detect when the wind speed is fast enough, and it triggers them to stop flapping. Because when the wind is fast enough, all they do is spread their wings and soar. Because when that wind speed is fast enough, what's carrying them? The wind. And if we are smaller than small and God is bigger than big, what carries us? God can carry us. So that stuff that we're worried about, or that stuff that we don't know what to do with, or that family or that friend or that thing that drives us nuts, does God know what to do with it? I have to trust that He does. God can make your things new. God can make my things new. And let me tell you, we all need new things. We're kidding ourselves if there's nothing in our lives that needs to be made new. We all have stuff, and we all have situations, and we all have worries, and we all have fears that need to be made brand new! The timing is impeccable today! But seriously, if we're going to go anywhere to find out how to make things new, where can we go? We can say, God, I don't know what to do, but I need you to come in and make these things new. We can cry out to God, and you know what? God might fix it right now. Or God might fix it after we're gone. Who knows what God is going to do? Really, who knows what God is going to do? Have we gotten this message yet? I mean, surely we have. God can make our stuff new. He wants us to rely on Him, to soar with Him, to rely on the fact that God is bigger than us, and we are so much smaller. So when we don't know what to do, let's go to Him. And let's go to Him now. Let's pray.